Hey Sean,
Hey Nico.
most of you know Sean. Sean is our leader of youth ministry. And Sean, could you tell us a bit about your experience working with young people the last 10 years, is it?
So it's 10, probably nearly 12. I started volunteering at my church in Reigate when I was about 20. I'm about 30 now. I am 30 now. Spent years there volunteering, but also working with the national church through Premier Christian Radio, working on their youth work magazine. So even then, in the early days, I engaged lots with the national youth work scene, running conferences for youth workers. Before I then got my first full-time post over in Cheam at St Paul's Howell Hill, where I spent 5 years, and now it's been a year here. A very weird year now as a result of coronavirus.
Yeah, it's not the norm. So for some of us, say I used to work with young people 20 years ago, and then for 10 years. So I stopped working 10 years ago. So I know how youth used to think, and maybe youth your generation are the people I used to work with. But obviously I'm now 38, 10 years without working with young people directly. Could you tell us a bit of kind of how has the youth culture shifted maybe in the last 10 years?
Yeah, well, we already know that young people are the most connected group of young people ever, and that'll only continue to grow. They've grown up with phones in their hands, and that's not something we should treat as... We treat phones so often as bad things, the internet as bad things, but it's just it's the community for young people. It's where they live and hang out. So there's that. They're really passionate about issues, any issue, in fact, surrounding any kind of form of social justice. So they're really big on that. They were really good at grabbing onto global trends. Actually, most of the issues that inform our media is actually informed as a result of young people. So it's they're the ones dealing with these trending topics. Yes, it normally comes out of people like the Kardashians. Google them if you need to know who they are, or big sports stars. But they're the biggest influences, and so they're part of that network of the biggest influencers in the world. It's global now as well. So their viewpoint is equally global.
So moving forward, how can sort of churches connect with young people better to kind of relate to them, learn from them? What are the kind of ways in which we can connect with them?
Well, it's so often it's just about genuinely listening. Whether you understand or not, it's about hearing what young people have to say, realising that they are going to be in your shoes, in whether it's 10 years or 50 years time, they will be in your shoes. Even as a result of this pandemic, they're the ones who are going to be propping up the country for, even in an economic sense, for years to come, and they have that weight, that burden on their shoulders now. They're going to be the biggest victims of any economic crash, and so they realise the weight and responsibility for it, which is why they take things seriously. But so we have to listen to them, we have to learn from them, we have to make sure their voices are heard for those who won't listen as well. So and that's really important to me. So much of my work with young people is about listening to them. It's about hearing their opinions, whether that's on the surface level or whether that's kind of really deep stuff, hearing what they care about. But even on a one-to-one personal level in my work for young people, they don't have the support that people used to have when they were growing up. So lots of the pastoral work is one-to-one. It's spending time with them, helping them grow personally as well as in their faith and in spirituality. And they need that support because our health system is busy, it's full, especially when it comes to kind of CAMS for adolescent mental health, things like that as well, which it's all great, but that's where youth workers, and not just me, but the entire youth team, children's team as well, they all step in and have a role to play in that.
And then obviously the young people have a lot to teach us, and I always am kind of encouraged by the energy they have and the kind of enthusiasm they bring, especially in a church context. We so need young people. What can we kind of learn from them?
Well, so I'm constantly learning as well. Like I said, I'm only 30, and I already have to try really hard to keep up with kind of their culture and what they're listening to, what they're getting involved with. But involving them in the life of church is, that's the passion we have here. It's about integrating people into kind of that worshipping community. But we often have to give up our ways and our preferences sometimes a little bit in order to give way, to give space to a different way of worshipping. And realising that for young people it's less and less about Sundays, although that is an important part, and joining together their communities throughout the week. They don't rely on that physical meeting space anymore. They rely on our small groups. They rely on WhatsApp groups. That's how we've been keeping in touch over the last nearly 5 months, through that kind of constant communication through Instagram and things like that as well. So it's about turning church out of an hour on a Sunday to something that is constant. But then as we look at our content on Sundays, then we go, well, how can we better engage with young people through that? How can we relax things? How can we be really on the buzz in terms of the cultural trends we look at? And which is why it's great that we as a church are really engaged with the kind of Black Lives Matter movement, because that's something that young people are really passionate about, often one way or the other. And it's, as the nature of social media, it does divide people. But giving forums for that discussion, it helps to show young people that we care, and it helps them to bring God into those issues in a world that often says God isn't part of it.
Yeah, no, thanks, Sean. That's really interesting, and actually, it's so hard sometimes for us when we want to show young people how much we appreciate and love them, and I know for many generations, older generations, it's very hard to show that, and actually just maybe listening is all we need to do.
But also there's the encouragement as well. Young people will worship when they're with other worshippers. Often they're so afraid to stand out and express themselves if they feel exposed in any way. So that's why it's great if we go to somewhere like Soul Survivor. There's a huge crowd of 9,000 young people all worshipping passionately. It's harder then to come back in church if people aren't worshipping with that same passion. So my challenge to us as a church community is be passionate about our worship of God, and that will inspire others and allow them that freedom to worship God in their own way, to be expressive, to be charismatic, to use that word bravely, and they'll connect with God, and that's how we're going to see a huge outpouring of the Spirit in what we do.
Thank you.
That's all right.
Let's cut that.